Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic, and my good friend Joe Price Stupa, who I'm a big fan of, introduced me to this gentleman, and I've been on his show a couple of times, and I really enjoy him. I feel like we have chemistry, and we're interested in the some of the same topics and whatnot. And I've spent about 4 or 5 hours blabbering on about my nonsense on his show, and I decided to have him over to mine so we can get to know him a little bit and see what else comes of it. Stephen Stathis, welcome to Strange Mosaic, my friend. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on, Emily. It's kind of cool. We're having a reverse role now. I'm the one in the interview chair, and you are the one interviewing me. So I'm looking forward to this. You get to hear my version of spitballing tonight.
All right, awesome. I love it. Okay. So, I'm really I'm introduced to you from your episode on the Melt with Joe Price Stupa, and then everything that I know about you has kind of followed from there. So I don't actually know anything about your origin story in terms of
Okay.
what your path was to whatever this thing we do here is. Right, like I don't know what this is anymore at this point, right? At one point it seemed like some kind of journey to truth, and now it just seems like I'm not sure, like with some obsession we have at constantly reframing and re-angling and talking about and analyzing and whatever everything. But whatever it is, we all seem to either enjoy it or not be able to stop doing it. So it's a thing. And why do you do it? Let's
So,
start.
so
Yeah.
I'll agree. I'll agree with you on the fact we are in some very strange, unknown, uncharted territory for this batch of humanity right now. Anything goes at this point, but nonetheless, my origin story. So, how I got to where I am today? Well, it all begins long ago, actually, about
Once
17
upon a
years ago.
time. Oh, I thought you were going to do it once upon a time. There we go.
Thousands upon thousands of years ago. No,
Yes, yes, yes. I love it.
I have laid dormant for that long, but no, actually, how this all began. So it's interesting enough. I've been on my spiritual evolution. I've been a part of this conscious collective now for 17 years. I actually fell into all of this when I was very young. I was 20 years old, and just like you, I struggled with substances. I was an opiate addict. I am a recovering opiate addict still, and about 20 years old, I just got out of jail. I was looking to really fix my life. I was looking for something different. I had been doing my life this one way up until this point, and then you come to realize at some point that this way is no longer working for you. You cannot just keep doing drugs and misbehaving and catching charges and ending up in jail. And I had a very tumultuous, I would say, childhood. It was there was a lot of messed up things that happened, but in 2008 is where this all started to come to fruition. So in 2008, I found a few things. I was seeking the divine. I was seeking a divine spark in my life, I guess is the best thing you could say. So I grew up in the middle of the schism that I joke about this. And people are like, how'd you grow up in the middle of the schism? I'm like, well, my mom's side of the family was Roman Catholic and my dad's side of the family was Greek Orthodox. So I grew up in the middle of the schism. I mean, I was sitting, standing, kneeling, donating, praying, all of that stuff. And and it got to a point where it's like I ended up leaving that around the age of 13, 14, and I always believed in the divine. I believed in some kind of intelligent creation here. I believed that there was something. I just felt the typical religions had it wrong. It was incorrect. And so when I was 20, I ended up falling into concepts like Gnosticism, Buddhism, Hermeticism, Taoism, Jainism, a lot of the Eastern spiritualities, a lot of the esoteric and mystic sects of like Christianity and things like that. And this the issue I had with your modern religion, your run of the mill religion, was it was too black and white. It didn't take account the gray in the world.
Mhm.
And all of this stuff I just found did. So I was like, oh my goodness. So this was like a huge thing for me. It just like burst forth. Like I started reading books and I started reading the Nag Hammadi scriptures. I started, reading the Tao Te Ching. I started reading all of these different books and versing myself in this. And I was like, I found that divine spark. The next thing is I had struggled with my weight my whole life.
Uh-huh.
I had always been on the heavier side. I had always been on the bigger side. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm done. We're doing this right. Like, we're finding the way to lose weight, build muscle, get healthy the right way, the way that comes with longevity, and turning it into more of a healthy lifestyle than crash dieting, like I ended up doing in the past. I've been on my health and fitness journey now for 17 years as well. And but this actually led me down a rabbit hole. This is what started the awakening process was because I'm like researching and I'm like, this is kind of strange. How come all of the healthy food that you're supposed to be eating is hella expensive and nobody can really afford it? But then all of the crap food that you're not supposed to be eating is really cheap and widely available. I'm like, this just seems really counterproductive. Like, I mean, we want to be healthy, right? Like, you know what? America touts that it wants to be healthy, but that led me down the rabbit hole of the food industry and how corrupt that is. And then during 2008, when I had this awakening, the recession. Everybody remembers the recession of 2008. And of course, young 20-year-old me at this point is like, I should learn how our financial system works. Why is it always so messed up? Why are we always in debt? Why is this always happening? And then I learned about the Federal Reserve and how the Federal Reserve works. Basically creating money out of thin air and then loaning it to us at interest. I was immediately taken aback and I was like, if this was common knowledge, I think a lot of people would be noping the fuck out of this right now. I think a lot of people would not be okay with what's going on right now. And then ever since then, man, it caused this catalyzation within me. I started to become immersed in all of this. I started, meditating, doing spiritual practices, started my health and fitness journey. I started researching, and this all culminated over the course of a decade, up until a little over a decade, up until 2020. And then in 2020, I had been on this for 12 years at that point. And then I started to see everything I had researched over the past 12 years start to kind of come to fruition in 2020. And I was like, okay, like, I'm not going to go into grave detail because I know you put your stuff on YouTube. I don't want you getting in trouble. But, everybody knows what happened in 2020. We all know that game. And I remember at that point in time, that's when I originally started the show back then. But it only had a short run and I ended up having to put it down for family reasons. But I look back now at who I was in 2020, and I look, a couple years later in 2022 when I revamped the show. I was way more comfortable with who I was in 2022 than I was in 2020. So I was actually kind of happy. I felt like I could do it in a way that I saw fit and then I saw right. And actually kind of how it all started up again was I had been thinking about revamping the podcast. And I don't know if any of you here know who Ben Davidson is of Suspicious Observers. He's kind of a big guy in the alternative media community now. He's out here in Colorado. I ended up going down to Colorado Springs. He ended up having a meet and greet down there. So I got to meet him, this big YouTuber, and like I was in the process of starting to revamp my podcast at this time. Like he was kind of a little bit of an inspiration to me. So I like went and I like sat with him. And I got to know him a little bit. He's a great guy. And we were chatting because he was trying to get on Rogan's podcast, talk about the Earth's disaster cycle. And we were kind of talking about that. And I just threw out jokingly, well, I have a podcast I'm thinking of revamping. I'll let you know when it happens. And he looked at me dead serious and goes, I'll get on it. So I was like, okay. So that was kind of the fire that was lit under my ass at that point. So I immediately got home. I immediately got everything together. I immediately started working on it. I reached out to him within a couple weeks of getting everything started back up. And Ben Davidson was one of my very first guests on the show. A big guest for my first guest. I was really grateful that he took time out of his busy life. He's always doing events and stuff like that to come and sit down with me. My channel only had 10 followers at the time. I was like really like enamored by the whole thing. And but other than that, I was like, oh my God, but other than that, no, I've just been trucking it. I've been doing it, and I've honestly fallen in love with what I do. The thing on my show is we learn together. You know what I mean? Like, even though I've been on my evolution for 17 years, let me tell you, I still don't have it all figured out. New things continuously reveal themselves to me on a daily basis at this point. We are breaking into what I call these many different layers of remembering, and these awakening layers that we're breaking into. And as we continue to go on, this new information is going to continue to reveal itself. So, that's why we learn together on my show. I try to do my best at teaching people some of these esoteric concepts and some of these concepts when it comes to spirituality, self-mastery, things like that. And yeah, and here we are today on your show.
All right, so I'm gonna poke around in there a little bit. Well, first of all, congratulations on getting clean by the time you were 20. It took me till I was 40. So,
Thanks, I appreciate that.
congratulations that you realized something was wrong with your life at the ripe old age of 20. Can you tell me a little bit about your it's interesting, like most of the people I've had on the podcast as first-time guests lately all have a background with drug abuse. Um,
Mhm.
which is something that, I've always been forthcoming about my drug use, but it was never sort of like it was a part of my story, but it wasn't like I've never done shows about like recovery or addiction. Like that's just it's
I know what you mean.
what that is for me. But lately, with certain topics that I've really been leaning into, or certain ways that I'm really not I'm not going to say beginning to understand our reality, but like because there are ways I've been understanding our reality for a long time, but how I'm really starting to sort of triangulate like my experiences, my knowledge, and then from my own research and then from conversations I've had with other people, drugs are really a much more important part of our reality than we give them credit for. We think of them as
Mhm.
either recreational or this is terrible, it was an addiction. But it seems like since the beginning of time, people have been fascinated with taking drugs for many, many reasons. It's never not been a thing. It will never not be a thing. It's always been a thing. Like maybe it's the thing. Maybe it's when I say it's the thing, I'm not encouraging everyone to run out to do it, but like maybe it really is this hugely important part of how our reality has developed to the way that it is. And both for the good and for the bad, right? It's been a huge part of our evolution and like an in-depth understanding of it on a personal level rather than just from authorities is probably in order if we're going to move past this sort of top-down layering of reality, right? And so it's
Agreed.
just interesting that lots of people that I've had on lately, like part of their origin story is that they had a struggle at some point with drugs. I do think that like once that window is open for you, like it kind of stays open even if you don't keep using drugs. Like once you're sort of aware of the alternate realities that are all around us, like you don't have to revisit them every day to know they're there and to sort of tap into them when you feel like that's sort of where this is coming from, right? So can you tell me a little bit about like your drug use, how you got into it, what happened, why you stopped, blah blah blah.
Well, so the one thing I'll say is this is I still do use cannabis and entheogenic medicines. Those are the two things that I
I
still
don't do
use. I don't
cannabis because I don't like it, but I still use psychedelics. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't drink alcohol and I don't do hard drugs. So my opinion on drugs is this, and then I'll hop into the story. There are substances that expand your mind, and then there, in my eyes, there are substances that close it off.
Hmm.
And even though some of those substances that close it off can give you a taste of the alternate realities, but if you continue to do those substances, you're going to get plunged into what I would call a dark polarity frequency alternate reality, and nobody wants to be there. But my whole journey with drugs actually began when I was 13. I smoked cannabis my first time. And I enjoyed it thoroughly as a 13-year-old boy. I mean, one of the first thoughts in my mind after I got high my first time, I was like, why is this illegal? Like I couldn't understand why cannabis was illegal at the time, even at being 13. I was like, I feel happy, I'm laughing, I'm, enjoying music, like I'm just laying in a swimming pool, like looking at the sky, like, like it completely in love with the experience. And then it kind of started to go from there. And how the painkillers and the opiates first started to come into being was so I dislocated my shoulder when I was 16 years old. We were at a house party, and I ended up jumping a fence because the cops showed up to the house party, and I didn't see there was a 10-foot drop on the other side of the fence. I was just like, yo, I got to get out of here. And when I jumped over this fence, I jumped up and then I looked down and I saw the ground and I was like, oh crap. And I ended up like twisting and rolling. I hit my left shoulder. I dislocated it. Um, didn't know how to pop it back in at the time, so I ended up getting taken to the ER. So I ended up going to an orthopedic doctor, and he started giving me these 90 count bottles of Darvocet. And mind you, I'm a 16-year-old kid. I don't know about addiction. I don't know about opiate withdrawals. I don't know anything about that. And so I started taking these 90 count this Darvocet, and I had refills on this bottle too. This just shows you how the pharmaceutical industry used to be, and they still are in kind of some ways. And I remember I'm taking these every day, and these things are making me feel great. And I'm a young 16-year-old kid, and I'm like, man, I can see why people like this stuff. Like it makes them feel great. I feel so comforting and warm, or comfortable and warm, and like blissful and all of that. And so I ended up taking, I was like 6 months I was on these drugs. And like, when I would run out, I would end up getting more painkillers from friends to keep it going and all that. I didn't know about withdrawal though up until this point. So about 6 months down the line, I had gotten my shoulder fixed. I had gotten the surgery on it and all that. And the doctor decided he was going to cut me off of the pills. And I said, okay, cool, no problem, whatever, but 2 days after no medication, I was 17 at this point. I was deathly ill. I was sick. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. So I was going to an alternative high school, my senior year of high school. I got kicked out of regular high school because I showed up to school on MDMA and got booted out
Like
for
you
that.
do. Yeah. All right.
Yep, yep. So, but my buddy, one of the buddies I went to high school with, he would go to DC and he'd get raw heroin. And I remember I would call him and he's like, I got you, bro. Don't worry. You can come up to DC with me. We'll get you taken care of. We'll have you feeling better in no time. And I was like, all right. So I remember I had like $50 on me and we ended up going to DC and he hands me these 5 little bags of it was scramble heroin at the time, but I ended up doing raw heroin down the line.
What is
And
scramble? What is scramble heroin?
scramble heroin's cut with like quinine, things like that, like blood thinners to help it make you hit you quicker.
Okay.
Because if you IV raw heroin, there's kind of like a delay in it. Like it takes like about like 2 minutes to really start taking effect. But if you put that blood thinner in it and you do scramble heroin, it hits you instantly. But I didn't even try to shoot it at first. I remember I got these 5 bags and I'm sitting there in the car. We're on the way home. I'm trying to like cut lines with the stuff and my buddy goes, "You're not going to get off with it that way, dude. I'm going to show you how you're going to get off with it." And I remember we went to his house and he had a needle and all that, and he ended up pushing himself off. And then I looked at him and I saw like what it did to him, and I was like, "Do you have a clean one of those? Because I'm not using yours." And he was like, "Yeah, I got you." So that was the first time I ended up shooting heroin at 17 years old. And I was instantly hooked, instantly, and my life pretty much started to go downhill for the next 3 years.
Are you
And
where are you from? I heard you say DC. Are you're not
so,
from
so
Colorado?
I'm originally from the DC area. I moved
Okay.
out to Colorado in 2015.
Okay.
So if there's one thing you want to know, if you all are really interested, a lot of the stuff is true, and I have stories about that, and we can get into that later if you want to talk about it. But so I ended up, going off the rails. And towards the end of it, I was doing about 1.5 grams to 2 grams of raw heroin a day, which is a pretty large amount. And I was staying in these podunk motels with my cousin, who was also hooked on it. And we ended up, just doing work to make money, going to doing odd jobs to make money to go buy drugs. And so we were on the way home one night from a job. I was dope sick because I didn't have anything, but he pulled up on a construction site that had a bunch of copper wire on it. And he's like, I need your help stealing this wire. And I was like, dude, I can't. Like, I can't even move. Like, it was coming out of both ends. I couldn't even move. So he ended up stealing it all. And he's like, you're not getting as big of a cut because you didn't help me steal it, whatever. But And so he ended up being ridiculous about it. He didn't even cut it up or anything or take it off the reels. He went to this freaking scrap house and said he had some copper wire stashed around the corner and he was going to go get it. As soon as we went to go get it, we were greeted by two cops, and that was my first stint in jail. And then I withdrew cold turkey in jail off of a 2 gram a day habit, which was not fun. It was 10 days of complete hell. And I was kept in a holding cell the whole time with guards laughing at me as I was withdrawing. So yeah, pretty interesting experience there. But really, the one thing that it did do for me, in a good sense, the silver lining behind the whole addiction was is it pushed me closer to the light. It pushed me closer to the divine. When you are in jail, you are in one of the darkest places on the planet. There is nothing but darkness in jail.
Mhm.
There's little bits of light, but and after being around, the only reason I made it out of there, I'm convinced, is because
So it
I
was
just,
just
you know,
one time in jail and one time out, and that was it.
no, I did collectively over a year and a half in jail.
Okay, so
There
you were
was
going in and
multiple.
out, and when you'd come out, you'd do drugs again, and then you go back.
No, 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 not that I would do drugs. What happened was is the copper wire we stole, we spanned 3 different counties with that copper wire.
Got it.
So, I had to do jail time in a few different counties for what happened.
But you only had
So,
that one big withdrawal.
yeah, that one big
Boy, you sure got the
withdrawal.
message the first time.
Well, I did. It was kind of good because what's interesting is when I was locked up, I found Raw Law of One, and that was kind of like the predecessor to me. And I remember reading this book, and I was like, this makes sense. You know what I mean? A lot of this stuff makes sense at the time. And but I still even though I quit doing opiates, I still ended up struggling a little bit with alcohol a little later into my late 20s, early 30s. But luckily, I had the foresight to, because of my previous issues, to know where the alcohol thing was going.
Right.
And so I was able to put it down. Now I just every so often will have an occasional drink. I can do that now. It's just because I don't like the feeling of being drunk anymore.
It's
It's more of
very
a social
interesting,
thing.
right? There's some people that are fucking addicts, and if they don't have cocaine, they'll do alcohol. If they don't have alcohol, they'll smoke pot or do meth or do
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Sex, gambling, over exercising. There's some people that just are addicts, and then there's other people who it's really just like one thing that seriously sends them for a loop, and like kind of once they've gotten enough distance from that, they seem to be able to balance other stuff once in a while. Um, I only tried heroin once. It's like for me, I had a go round with crack cocaine when I was like 19 or 20. Like that was the first drug I ever did. Like I had tried marijuana once and not liked it. And then like some parent of a gymnast that I coached, I was like hanging out with her and she was smoking crack and she's like, I didn't know that that's what it was. So I just
My
tried it.
goodness.
Like before I understood what I was doing, I was like, oh, this is good shit, right? So I had a year with that. And then I was not doing drugs for a couple of years. And then I started going to parties, to raves. And while I didn't ever get addicted to the psychedelics or the entheogens, like a person that I like went to parties with and kind of a crew that I hung out with were also into meth. And like it took me
Mhm.
a while to sort of get into that, but then once I did, I was doing that from the time I was like 25 to 40, except for like I had a few periods of time in there where I got clean for a bit. But for me, like I tried heroin one time, right? Some guy that I used to occasionally get meth from was like hanging out over at my house and he was like, you want to try it? And I'm very much a try anything once kind of person, like still pretty much am that way. So I was like, sure. So we smoked black tar heroin and I immediately like I smoked the tiniest amount. Like it was so like a match head size little piece on the foil and I barfed a lot. And then like I laid face down in my bed, like awake but not able to move for like
Yeah.
10 or 12 hours. It felt like
Oh yeah.
dead and alive at the same time. Right. It was, and so it didn't appeal to me. Like for me, it's always been more either like the uppers for like, drugs, but like I like the psychedelic experience because of like the story and all the things that kind of go along with
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
Right. But heroin was not for me. But I did get enough of a feeling of it that I understood what it was that people who like that were after. Like like for me, like the meth was more like plunging deeper into reality, like into the minutia and reality. And heroin was like completely extracting yourself to the point where like you're just sort of barely alive and aware that reality is happening, but you're completely distanced from it. So I understood that like people with different personality types, coping mechanisms, ways of feeling comfortable or uncomfortable, like that was the thing that appealed to them in a different way than like the deep plunge into minutia of meth. Like that appealed to me, right? But I can't imagine like being like that at 17, right? That would have that would have been appealing at 17. So, but the way that you found your way in was through painkillers, so it kind of makes sense. But, again, kudos to you for sort of getting the message quickly.
Thanks.
Most
Appreciate it.
people don't like get in and out of it that quickly, right? Like
It
there's,
takes it takes some time for some people too. I mean, I fucked around with other things too. I had a small stint with cocaine. I got to a point with that where it's like, I got to a point with coke where it's like, I really like how it makes me feel when I'm on it, but when I come off, it is the worst feeling
the
in the
worst.
world. And that it's
Cocaine
like
is the worst feeling in the
it's
world.
like it's like I joke like you could have everything going right in your life, and you could have like a great job, a nice house, like a great family, great life all to go. You do cocaine and you start questioning how you're fucking up, and that's the best way I can describe it. It's like you could have a perfect life, everything's good. You do cocaine, and then when you're coming off cocaine, you're like, man, I really need to get my shit together, bro. Like you have like this, like it's almost like this meltdown almost, and
Yeah.
it's not fun, and that's why I kind of decided to part ways with it. I the thing about psychedelics and cannabis is cannabis and psychedelics have never harmed me. The only things that have come a harm that has come out of that was just them being illegal. And that was really really it because I had a small thing where I was 17 before I got popped with all the charges where I got busted with a little weed. I ended up just getting a slap on the wrist. I didn't but like, at that point, like that was the only damage that cannabis and psychedelics did to me was the fact that they were not legal. I'm in a state where both of them are legal now, so that's a good thing. And they've profoundly helped me heal from a lot of the stuff that a lot of the trauma I went through in my life. A lot of the messed up things that happened to me as a kid. They helped me kind of find closure and work through that. So, like, I mean, that's why I love the psychedelic experience just as much as you. And it's something that's very special to me. And I do think, honestly, what psychedelics are they are a trip to a higher state of consciousness. They're a trip to a higher state of awareness. And with that being said, we see that all of these psychedelics, a lot of them, model an endogenous neurotransmitter that we have called dimethyltryptamine. And we know that we have endogenous dimethyltryptamine in our bodies, and it's released. According to a lot of the theories and speculation, it's released 45 days after we are conceived in the embryo. It is released, I think, within 45 seconds of us being born. It's released again. And then it's released while we dream at night, while we have lucid dreams. And then it's released 6 seconds after we pass from this earth. That's very interesting in of itself. That's why I look at dimethyltryptamine as the physical manifestation of the spiritual connection we all have with each other and all the life in this reality. And I also look at DMT as the gateway to these other realms. So, and then we look at these psychedelics, such as the tryptamine compounds, such as psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, 5-MeO DMT. There's a couple of other ones, AMT, DIPT, a couple of the synthetics, but we have these tryptamine compounds, and they all are very similar in molecular structure to
Mhm.
dimethyltryptamine. So that's why you have these, even LSD, even though it's not a tryptamine, it's like a really strange halfway molecule. It's technically a lysergamide, but it works on two receptor sites. It does work on your serotonin sites, like the tryptamine compounds do. And then it also works on the dopamine receptors, which like a lot of things like mescaline and like, MDMA work on. So it's kind of like a halfway point. And then you even look at the phenylethylamine psychedelics, which are like mescaline, MDMA, 2CB, all of those different psychedelics as well. And they still have the backbone structure of dimethyltryptamine in their molecular structure. So to me, when we break down, psychedelics and what they are a profoundly fascinating tool that allows us to go deep within our psyche, deep within our consciousness, to these other layers of our existence, these other layers of reality. And sometimes these layers are within us, there are these aspects of us. I'm sure some of you guys know who Carl Jung is, the shadow, the Kabiri, all of these different concepts from Jung that ultimately end up coming out in these experiences as well. So really, I mean, psychedelics, they're at least in my eyes, they are a physical representation of the spiritual connection between all life. They are a gateway to these other realms that we could potentially access or leave here and go to at the time of death. And they are also tapping us into this heightened state of awareness where all of these different areas of our brain that are normally working separately from each other all begin to work in unison now. And this is what catalyzes that very interesting experience, and that's why people have things like synesthesia, like they'll be smelling colors or tasting sounds during these experiences. Because yes, I know, yeah, I know that's why you're shaking your head, but
Well, I definitely have synesthesia. I'm just while you're talking, I'm looking for something I can't remember if I saw it on Instagram or where I saw it, but I saw an interesting post which actually felt kind of confirmatory to the way I've been thinking about some things. And the post was talking kind of about, let me see if I can find, I can't remember if I took a screenshot of it or if I sent it to myself on email. Like I tend to do one or the other if I want to go back and look at it. But I was just if I send it to myself on email and it's a Instagram post, sometimes like I don't have the right like I just have to make up a title. It doesn't give me a title. I'm just like, okay, I don't think it's. Let me just.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I'll
I
send
feel
it
you.
to myself,
It's
but
int
I want to. Oh, here we go. Is it? No, it's not that. I just want to find this thing because it goes to what you're talking about. Essentially, the point of the post was basically how they're finding that like I think it was like on a morning glory flower, they were finding like a fungus growing on it that like resembled both ergot, so LSD and psilocybin, right? And of course, morning glories are also there. It's oliliquai, which was an original psychedelic compound that actually started the MK Ultra sub projects and whatever it is. So I've kind of suspected that a lot of these compounds have the ability to transform themselves into the other one, right? And what you were just talking about how they all sort of model the same, model dimethyltryptamine, and like basically we have these, receptors in our brain that are looking, it's like keyholes, and anything that's the shape of that key can go in there and sort of turn it. And so if you have sort of this like some of these compounds that are almost able to seemingly transform themselves, like it's almost like they look at the receptor and they're like, oh, I'm almost that, I can do this to myself and then I can become that. And it's I like I'm starting to really wonder about how, like, sure, I think there's all these different plants out there and different ways of synthesizing specific compounds or specific atoms or molecules or whatever it is. But I also think that the things can transform themselves from one thing into another. And I think part of how we um are in fact to the very level that it's possible that the molecules are the very self-transforming machine elves that Terence McKenna was talking about, right? That this is part of why we can't ever quite get our heads around how all of this works because we're looking at everything as being separate, measurable, sampleable, and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's actually how chemistry and biology works. I think everything is in the process of going from what it just was to what it will next be, and it's very rarely static in what it is. And that keeps us from completely understanding the full like breadth of possibilities that can happen when uh, intelligence is exposed to a substance, and whether that intelligence is human intelligence or whether we're talking about vibrations being applied to certain kinds of technology or things like that, everything is sort of in this constant state of flux where if you catch it sort of at one moment, it's not doing it, but in another moment, it can be doing it. But if you've already become convinced that it's not it because it wasn't doing it a minute ago, you stopped looking and you missed when it's about to do it, right? Like that kind of thing. I can't find it, but if I can find it before I put this show out, I'll cut in the little piece because oh here no yeah that's not it. I'll cut it in.
So one thing I want to ask you, and this ties into exactly what we're talking about. Have you ever heard of the theory called panpsychism? Have you ever
Heard of
heard
all
of the
kinds of
quant?
pans, but what exactly is panpsychism?
So what panpsychism is it's actually one of the newest and up and coming theories in quantum physics. It actually started back in 2008. It was kept very, very hush hush because it completely destroys the current paradigm of physics as we know it. But in a nutshell, what panpsychism is, it is the theory that consciousness is the prime fundamental of our existence,
Mhm.
and everything stems from consciousness. The external physical experience that we have is all consciousness. It's all collapsed wave functions, and it is also as well it takes into account a lot of different studies that came out. You know, the double slit experiment where photons were going through two holes at the same time, the quantum entanglement, the collapse of the waveform function itself due to observation. So panpsychism has something that runs off the implicate explicate model. So the explicate is our perceived external experience
Yep.
that we are having here.
Yep.
And the implicate is the observer that is observing this perceived external experience. So, kind of letting credence to what you said on how a lot of things are in flux and
Yep.
how a lot of things they're in this state of flux. They're going from a state that they were to a state that they're going to be. And I really do think that our consciousness and our perception has a lot to do with this, because you have to think, if our consciousness collapses a waveform function, if reality is not present until we observe it, these compounds, when we observe these compounds and we research these compounds and what they do and their effects on us, we're dealing with a lot of subjectivity if we're looking at it from that level. And really what this kind of does is it puts the grand scheme of reality. It's the most hated theory in quantum physics right now for a couple reasons. One, if consciousness truly is the prime fundamental of all existence, that would take our place here in the universe as being, by coincidence or by chance, like the common narrative says, to us being here is absolutely necessary. We would have to be here in order for the universe to exist. is basically where this takes us. That's the number one reason why it's the most hated theory in quantum physics, is because it takes away that narrative of just being on this random little chance of blue rock that's
Right.
just floating in this abyss, and it makes our existence actually important to the scope of the universe. Number two, what it does too is it de-objectifies reality. Because if consciousness is the prime fundamental of existence, we're not dealing with a completely objective reality at this point. What we're dealing with is a mutually agreed
Right.
upon
Yeah.
co-created experience at that point.
As I'm
And
looking at, real quickly, as I'm looking at this, just the general wiki, yes, this definitely a lot of things that are part of. I've never heard of the overall thing as panpsychism. Like before, I've heard the term, but I didn't know that that's what it was. But a lot of the things that are discussed as part of it are obviously things that I've looked into and have, some degree of awareness, knowledge, or agreement
Mhm.
with, or whatever it is. So yeah, I didn't know that all that was
Oh
classified
yeah.
under panpsychism. Um, but yeah, what you're saying, right? Like, I mean, anybody who's ever eaten the mushroom understands that there's an intelligence there. There is a consciousness there. And is it like, okay, so once you've eaten it, it's no longer in the mushroom because the mushroom doesn't exist anymore, but the
Mhm.
consciousness sure seems to be sharing time with yours, right? And my guess is that like once we're done with that experience, it's going back into the ground and it's going to re-embody itself as another mushroom or something like that, right? So I mean, but yeah, I mean, the more it is weird, like almost anything out there you can focus your attention on and start to have some level of interaction with it, whether it feels like an intelligent exchange or whether it just becomes an object that you have focused on and everything else seems to start arranging itself around that you've focused your attention there, which to me is some form of, though it might not be the same way that you and I think of being conscious or sentient or
Mhm.
whatever it is, it's some sort of like ordering ability that implies some level of awareness and ability to respond to the fact that it's being focused on.
Absolutely. I would no, it is. There is some kind of reciprocative effect. And yes, there's things that could potentially be sentient that we don't even understand, like how they could potentially there's even the philosophical question, if this is the case, is a rock conscious? Because if everything is ultimately consciousness and everything stems from that specific point or that specific point of observation when it comes to reality, could a rock be conscious? It's very possible that it could. Maybe not in a way that we understand it. Same thing with like the trees. I mean, we look at the trees in the mycelium, and we look at how the trees in the mycelium actually share this very deep intertwined underground network. We know that mycelium especially can have a underground network that's larger than its sprouting fruits or its fruiting bodies. And so yes, there are a lot of things here that are very, very aware, and in ways we might not completely understand. And I think that even goes into things like, when you were talking about the mushroom, like you were saying, that consciousness becomes a part of you for a little bit. It starts working with your consciousness while you're having this altered state of being, this altered state of mind. And it's very possible that these mushrooms have a different type of sentience that enables them to do that. And this is really one of the biggest hard pressing questions right now, because it's number one, too. It seems like at this point, quantum physics is dead set on proving a lot of the esoteric to be true. Especially when we look at the theory of panpsychism. And I mean, there's a lot of people who debate this. Some people do think consciousness could potentially just be a random byproduct of the universe evolving. But my thing about this, though, is, and this is a equation or a logical thing that I say to people to kind of get them to think about this, because when you look at this existence, right, and you look at this existence as a whole, I mean, I'm talking from the micro to the macro. There is a freakish level of organization and balance. You look, I mean, if you even looking at microcluster physics, right? The groupings of 10 to 1,000 atoms, right? These groupings of 10 to 1,000 atoms take on the shape of the platonic solids, on a microscopic level. So, and for those of you who don't know what the platonic solids are, they are these polyhedrons that are elemental energies. They have a very spiritual commonplace. They're actually used in mathematics and geometry still to this day. And we have these little tiny atoms organizing themselves from the 10 atom to 1,000, and everything. Look at how the moon is just the right size to eclipse the sun. Look at all of these other things too.
There's like I remember one particular mushroom trip where like I always have these kind of interesting sort of profound scientific lessons or insights or always like brief on the way in. It's like right when like it's start like in that space, not when it's right starting to hit you, but like between like I don't know, somewhere around 45 minutes to an hour in, somewhere in that period of time, I'll have like a moment of it showing me something about how something works. And I remember this one psychedelic mushroom trip that it was showing me how like that some brain cells or some sort of something in my mind was arranged exactly the way so I had been to the Indian Wells tennis garden in
Hmm.
Palm Desert, which is right next door to where Coachella is, right? So Coachella is at the
Okay,
Empire
okay.
Polo Field, and the Indian Wells tennis tournament is played at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, owned by Larry Ellison of Oracle, all of this kind of stuff, right? But it was showing me how the way that they had like the little village set up where like all the like shops are and like the food stands and
Hmm.
the tents where like the bars and the music are or whatever it is, like it sort of has like this little like circus tent sort of arrangement, but it was showing me how it was like the same as like some strip of some like part of some cellular membrane of like our biology or whatever. I don't even have the right language for it, but like I remember like it was showing me that, and then I went looking up something about it and I found it is like some part of our biology, but it does look exactly like how they have the shit set up at the Indian, right? So it's almost like what we think of as like this a fantastic futuristic sort of architecture and landscaping that's going on. It really is that we're like wandering around in giant versions of our own biology, right? And so
Absolutely.
when you're doing psychedelics, you're taking a look really into how your own synapses and neurons and receptors are firing and functioning and doing stuff. But then like what we're wandering around outside in is kind of everything is like a mini or a macro version of our biology or the universe, right? Like, and everything is kind of some iteration of that. I love watching. Do you ever watch Mud Fossil University's channel?
I've seen a couple of their shows
Right.
before.
So like his whole thing is like we're living on the corpses of giants. And so all the things that
Hmm.
we think of as like the natural phenomenon are like literally body parts of some like, like the Himalayan salt mines or like the ribs of a giant. And like if you look
Oh
at the
yeah.
way the veins of like red and pink and white in there, they're exactly the way fat develops on like a rib cage. And of course, like fat is like the saltiest part of your biology and whatever. And like some of it is a little out there, but a lot of it makes a lot of sense, right? So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so but everything is like that. And it's very interesting when like I wasn't thinking about that, right? I wasn't thinking about anything about my brain cells looking right, but it like showed me it like I was wandering through this thing and it was obvious to me it looked just like the thing at tennis garden and then it went down to this like biological and cellular level and like showed me how right now as I'm thinking about it it's like activating those parts and I was like, "Oh my God, okay."
I can imagine how you felt, and that's actually so that actually even ties into even that experience you had actually ties, and actually you brought this up on my show last time on how CERN, the Hadron Collider, is modeled after the human spinal column because I was talking with you about
Yep.
my Kundalini yoga practice on how really what the premise of it is you're pushing your endogenous DMT and your endogenous cannabinoids, which are actually located in your cerebral spinal fluid. And I actually came to realize that your endogenous DMT and your endogenous cannabinoids have a synergistic effect that they work with each other. And it's interesting too, because if you take exogenous, for the people who have taken exogenous psychedelics like mushrooms, LSD, when you smoke cannabis on top of it, it increases and intensifies the trip. So, like, this happens within you too, as well, with your endogenous DMT and your endogenous cannabinoids as well. They work together. But like you were saying, that's actually an esoteric thing there, Emily. So there's a saying that says, "Know yourself, and you will know the divine." Right. And you look at the 12 cranial nerves for the 12
Yep.
disciples, you look at the 33 vertebra,
Yep.
for the 33rd degree, you look at the 144,000 nadis that
Yep.
when they are purified, it leads to a heightened state of awareness and a heightened state of being. So that's actually a really, that's that, to me, Emily, and this is just based on through my experience, but I can't really solidify or prove this, but maybe the way I say it can maybe help people dig in and see it in their own experience. I think symbolism is the prime language of this existence. And this is something that I've entertained and that I've actually tried to coach people on understanding. I did an episode of my show called The Symbolic Lens on how to kind of break into this and to kind of, be able to view the world this way. But your experience screams that you were shown a symbolic
Yep.
aspect of your internal makeup that was being presented to you in this experience, and you made that correlation and that connection in this mushroom experience that you had, and it started to activate something within you. You're like, oh my goodness, I'm looking on the inside of myself, on the outside of myself, on the inside of myself, on the
Yeah.
outside of myself, and it's so that's what and that just even kind of pushes it closer towards to the fact for me that even just based on hearing your experience alone, that there is a language of symbolism that exists metaphysically
Yeah.
in this existence.
What's crazy about the last thing about this, and then I want to say something what you said about the particle accelerators and stuff is when the trip was over, I went inside the house. We were in an Airbnb, and that design was on one of the rugs in the Airbnb also. Right. So
Oh my goodness, dude, I would
right. It
have.
was great because I was trying, and on the way in, I was thinking, like, I was going in to get something to drink. I was starting to come down. I was like, how am I going to explain this to Jeff and Vanessa and Laura in the morning? And as I walked in, I'm like, oh my God, it's on the carpet. Perfect. I can show them the carpet and explain to them what I'm talking about, right? Um,
I love that, dude. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So a couple of things. For sure, like symbolism. I don't know if Mario Garza of Moloch Studies. He's become one of my really good friends, and it's very like once you sort of see it from a certain perspective, you can't unsee it. And yes, it's like
Mhm.
everything is always telling you exactly what it is. If only you can sort of see the sign, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
But as far as the particle accelerator stuff goes, like what do they tell you that they're doing at CERN, right? They're looking for the God particle. They are smashing
Mhm.
atoms together, right? They're accelerating particles to see if they can find the God particle, right? So to me, what that tells me is that God might be a particle.
Mhm.
And they've been just like people have spent their whole life trying to find God, trying to find Jesus, whatever it is. These scientists have spent billions and billions of dollars trying to find a very specific particle, right? And I don't know if it's that you create a certain conditions and some sort of particle appears or arises, or whether it's a process of transforming these other sort of more crude materials into they just recently talked about turning lead from lead to gold at CERN and whatever, right? But I don't know, like, if you dig into like Walter Russell and his idea of the universal one, like it's what you were saying about like the prima the consciousness being the prime sort of
The prima materia. There you go,
area,
prima materia.
right? So like if there's this sort of if consciousness is able to sort of materialize for a moment and at the moment that a new sort of level of awareness or a new awareness is born, there's a particle or a substance that sort of appears. And my guess would be that it would be something very tiny and many, many faceted. It would have
Mhm.
the prismatic quality to it that would sort of send off this sort of entire prismatic array and then probably disappear or just sort of move on or whatnot. But that would sort of open up like this whole like array of or this sort of blinding light for a moment, right?
Hmm.
And that if we think about all of the stories and whether they're true or whether they're mythologies, I mean, if you think about it, like scientists and people who are very, very religious or spiritual are often using the same symbols for what's important to them, or they might have a different thing that they think it means, but they're literally commenting on the same intersection of two stimuli or whatever it is, right? So so yes, I think that the particle accelerators, our spine looks like a linear particle accelerator. And then if you look at it head on, it looks like, our irises and our eyes. It looks like our eyes. And we hear about the eyes being the window to the soul. But if you're into, looking further into what some people would say is a quack science of iridology, but what other people would say is like an investigation into mapping of cryptochromatics and fat lipid deposits in one eyes, which determines how a person decodes light and perceives reality. Like, I actually think that MK Ultra is an eye studying program as much or more as it was like mind control or brain understanding kind of thing, right? And so they're telling you what that is. Now, I don't have you ever checked out the FPV Angel YouTube channel? They talk a lot about particle accelerators.
I have not actually, but I'm gonna write that down. FPV
FPV
Angel.
Angel, right? So their theory, their idea is that they call them angels, particle accelerators, they call them angels, and that they are like part of the structure of the earth. It's not something that necessarily like now that there's man-made ones that have been built, but that they are part of the original structure of our realm, and that they create what we think of as nature. Like their energetic fields are
Interesting.
like equal to the descriptions of the personalities of the angels and the deities and things like that in scripture and Bible and mythological texts and all of that kind of stuff. And in fact, they think there are 144,000 of them.
Yeah, that's
Right?
very interesting.
So, like, whether that's exactly right or just like a way of kind of understanding the entire thing, I
Hmm.
think there's sort of something there to that. Why do they name all of these like installations like particle accelerators and nuclear reactors and tokamak reactors? They always give them like names of gods or ancient mysteries and things like that. What if it really isn't that they're naming it after that? What if it's that we're actually finally finding out what that was all about? And that these things
Okay.
have, been here, and what we now think of as science is the thing that the mystery was about at the time that the religions were, or the stories about the religions were formed. And it's just like, you know what it is. Like some people don't have a scientific mind. They need like a story to make it make sense. And at
Hmm.
some point, the science and the story got separated into two different, completely different paths that are literally like born from the same thing, but have been completely separated from one another to the point where they're completely different things at this point, and they're warring against each other. But both of them still use the same symbology to describe the phenomena that are most important to their fields, right?
Absolutely.
It's pretty crazy.
I've I've seen that. It's interesting. So that's why there's a lot of people, and I think we even talked about this on last time you were on my show, on how eventually that this is going to come full circle again. There's going to be what I feel is almost a lot of I'm bringing up the spirit science, not just because of the video, or the video series. Although it's a great video series. I mean, if you check it out for sure. But there's going to be almost this unison. I do think at a time because I mean, back in the day, even lending credence to what you're saying, I don't know if you heard about when they found that 14,000-year-old nuclear reactor in
I mean, the
South
one
Africa.
the one in Oakland Gabon, I talk about it all the time. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so. Was it the one that was depleted uranium deposits in a cave, but they were organized in like a geometric pattern?
Okay, I mean, you might be talking about something else. I'm talking about the one I know about is like a 2 billion or whatever year old natural fission reactor in Oklo, Gabon, and the way that they identified that it had been a natural fission reactor was based on the amount of ruthenium that was deposited that was in the ground there,
Okay.
right? So you might be talking about a separate one. I'm going to look that up. 14,000-year-old reactor in
In
South.
South Africa. Yeah, so I've heard of the one that you're talking about too. You've just kind of refreshed it for me,
Fact,
but you know,
that Sam Altman OpenAI stuff is going to be powered by reactors that are literally called Oklo. Like they're stealing the name and creating these small. I'll show it to you. Like this is the new Oklo nuclear reactors. This is
check
Sam
it out. Yeah.
Altman. This is it's called Oklo Inc. Right? This is the new. This is what they will look like. It's funny. They look like a fucking church or something like that, like some sort of interesting.
Interesting.
But this is the new Oklo reactors, right there.
Interesting.
But the original place is Oklo Gabon reactor. And I'll show you what it's so it's 1.7 billion years old, natural
So
fission reactor, right? And this is what it looks like. It's like just this basically scar on the earth at this point. But for 1.7 billion years ago, for like thousands of years, it was naturally just fission reacting, right? And they can tell by what is in the ground there that that is what it was.
holy mackerel, man. No, this is yeah, no, but this is it's lending credence to what we're talking about. It's very possible that there is a what I would say potentially, because now we're looking at human history and we're seeing that our consensual narrative of human history might not be the case, but it's possible that this could have been utilized by some kind of ancient civilization, or it could have been utilized by the planet in a way that we don't completely understand yet, or we haven't completely tapped into just yet. And that's profoundly fascinating. And it kind of goes through with a lot of these different things that people have found. So there's actually a story that ended up coming up, and I validated the story. It's true. There's evidence for this actually happening. But of course, you're going to get conflicting reports. You're going to have a lot of the mainstream sources are going to tell you that what they found was not that old. But if you go, there's some mainstream sources, though, on the topic that say that it was actually that old. And but of course, use your discernment, decide what you want. But back in it was 1968 in Siberia, Russia.
Hmm.
They were digging a mine. And in this mine, they ended up finding, I forgot the exact name of what they call her. If I did, I would tell you so you could
I
look it
got it
up.
right here.
Yep, yep.
So
So
just so
there
you
was
know,
the
the thing that you thought was the 14,000-year-old thing in South Africa, it's not. It's the thing. I think you're thinking of the thing I was telling you about in Gabon,
it is
right?
it
Yeah,
probably is.
this
I
I've
must
been
have
able
got
to
the wrong
find.
date.
This I was able to find.
Okay, so that's the solar eclipse thing, but this is actually has to do with the sarcophagus. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. So these people
There you
in yep, there we go. That's it is widely documented and scientifically validated. There are papers on it. There are papers on it. You can scroll down and see it. But yeah, the Tizul princess. So what's interesting about the whole situation is according to the Siberian Ice Maiden, things like that, you're gonna have um, conflicting dates on the dating. You're not going to be able to find a straight date on it, but there's a lot of other people that have, especially witnesses from the event, that have come forward and spoken about it as well. So they found a sarcophagus in this mine, and based on where they found this sarcophagus in this mine, it's dated to be around 800 million years old.
yeah.
And it's which when we think about that in the context of consensual human history, we're like that couldn't possibly be because this is at a time where the Earth maybe had very early dinosaurs, things along those lines.
Yeah.
But they have ended up finding it, and apparently, according to the eyewitness reports of the people who witnessed this, It was a 12-foot sarcophagus. The skeleton on the inside was 9 feet. And it was buried with something that looked like a smartphone-like device. And yeah, so something along those lines like that. I don't know if that's the exact photo of her, but yep, the Siberian ice maiden inside the wood. And there's a lot of conflicting reports on it. Some said it was a stone sarcophagus, some said it was a wood sarcophagus. Um, but again, we're looking at a history of our planet, and we're looking at potentially a lot of things that we don't understand and we have yet to discover that we are going to be coming full circle with. Yeah, 21,000 year iPhone.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of different
Yeah.
art of there's a lot of different out of place artifacts like that. I don't know if that nuclear fission reactor falls into that, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm curious to see if maybe, and now that you brought that to my attention, I'm kind of curious to see if that it is possible if this was, I mean, of course, we're not going to be able to know for sure if it was utilized by some kind of civilization in the past. But I'll digress back to what you were saying. It is there's a lot about this planet that we've probably lost touch with, and that we've we a lot of, like you said, the story and the science split up.
Right.
How that ended up happening, I don't necessarily know, but I do believe we are going to come full circle with that, and we're going to see something like that in our lifetime.
Part of the clue, like to me, the clue that that is undoubtedly true, that like the science and the story split, but it's the same thing, is like, and I talk about this all the time, like where I come from in Los Angeles, Chatsworth, right? The very location where the Manson tunnel was, where he was
Yep.
like hanging out and doing all that stuff, is exactly the place where there was a reactor, right? Supposedly it's decommissioned now. I don't believe that. I think there's a bunch of stuff going on there. But there's also many thousand-year-old cave paintings that seem to point to the idea that there is some kind of portal or like window that opens at certain times into sort of other realities. Now, why would these three things be on the literally same piece of property, right? Like, why would all of this stuff be occurring simultaneously unless that, have you seen that? I love to talk about it, but have you seen that TV series Dark? Thanks for watching the first hour of my recent conversation with Stephen Stathis. To enjoy the full, more than 2 hour conversation titled Seeking a Divine Spark, head on over to one of my support pages and you will find it there. Links for Patreon, Locals, and Rockfin are down below. There is a promo code for a free month on Locals. There's also an option for a free week at two different levels on Patreon. And you will also find Steven's links in the description box below. Go check out his show, BG Cast. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time.